Can't be disposed of.
If it's not true, it can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the other piece of true, that, where we're looking at right now, the New Mexico Environmental Department, EMED, has a site permit, just like Ecology has for Hanford, for the waste isolation pilot plant down in New Mexico. They, put out an addendum to that permit, a draft language, which specifies that, in certain time windows, a certain percentage of the legacy transuranic waste going to New Mexico, to WIP, has to come from Los Alamos National Lab. So from 2027 to 2035, I think, it's 55% of the material has to go from Los Alamos. And after that, it's 75% until Los Alamos is done. So we're watching that. Right now, it doesn't seem like it's gonna be a short-term impact on Hanford. But if Los Alamos doesn't finish by that time where it ramps up to 75%, that could cause some delays on our site. And we're toying with some ideas for a comment letter on that. The comment period closes at the end, June 22nd, I believe. So stay tuned.
But what, there has been pushback, just so we talk about true light, where there's been pushback, including, the state of Washington say, if it's true, it's true. So we need to treat it as such. We're not having true light. We're not getting into semantics on that. So if it's a duck, it's a duck.
Because why would we ship riprap to Idaho instead of just putting it in Earth?
It's contaminated.
Because it can't go, because true cannot, it has to go to, it's approved to go to WIP. It has to go to WIP.
There's a lot of speculation as to why that would happen. It needs to get characterized and it needs to get downsized, right? It's big pieces of building rubble. It needs to get characterized so they can determine whether it's true or whether it's not. If it's not true, it can go to landfill. If it is true, it has to go
all the way to Idaho to characterize.
The
Yes.
they have staff capability to do that work.
Well, this goes back to just the basic, simple, common sense, because there's no nuclear waste sites for everything, so then all this stuff going everywhere.
Well, yeah, because there's different sites that are approved to hold different materials. There's Clyde, Utah, there's waste control specialists in Texas, there's WIP. So depending on what the site, what you dig up and characterize determines where it goes, whether by permit, it stays on site or it goes off site. That's why it's coming through the state, because that material, that waste stream has a place that it can go. And while I'm talking about it, so on the outreach and training piece, which I talked about November meeting, we've been to Ontario as part of outreach and training for the resumption of the True campaign, and also talking about everything else that's on the horizon. We just were in Baker City last week. That kind of tied up everything we've been doing the last couple of years that we started with Umatilla County. And then we went to La Grande. So we've hit everybody in the corridor within in the last 2 years, and we're going to continue. So, and that was the first responder community, folks from the hospitals, law enforcement community, and also ODOT staff. Yes, sir.
If I understand you correctly, big pieces of building are going to be shipped to Idaho, maybe, to be characterized.
That's the,
How do you class the shipment to get it to Idaho?
that's the discussion that's being happening.
Yeah.
That's happening right now.
That's determining, that's classifying it to determine what is it. And
Okay,
just-
so it's a direct measure of radiation
If
determines.
it's wrapped up with an element that is true, transuranic waste, then it's true. And then it's gotta be repackaged, but I don't even know the sizes. Did you guys know the sizes? You can see?
They're in, so when we first heard of this, and looked into it, we identified that it is in containers, as of right now, right, being stored up in here. Related to the deployment edition plan and to the demolition of the building. As I had mentioned, at this point in time, Department of Energy, the Hanford site has not made a decision to ship any of this to Idaho. For characterization, but certainly we ask the Department of Energy advice to be still considerate some. It will certainly be conversations had with not only, Department of Ecology, but members of the Western State Interstate Energy Board that would want to have some conversations about the transportation and the classification for type of container vehicles.
And I'm sure that when Eddie and I get back from Texas in a few weeks, and the next meeting will probably just, gonna be more discussions about everything that's on the horizon.
Yep.
Julia?
Yes, hi. I don't want to take up a lot of time, but if this is a topic, excuse me, that you'd like to follow up on, I'm happy to provide some updates. I have been involved in some of the recent discussions with the Western Interstate Energy Board, discussing how we can best facilitate cleanup missions, not just at Hanford, but at other sites who have difficult items, as was described, items that could benefit from capabilities at places like AMWTP in Idaho that has robust size reduction capability. So that is something we're discussing. As we heard, decisions have not been made, but certainly anything that ultimately goes on the road will be in compliance with Department of Transportation and based on the characteristics of the material. So, is it a type A quantity? Is it a type B quantity? What are the radionuclides? Those will be the determining factors in how that gets done compliantly and safely.
Maybe I'll just add, Mike, exactly to your point. The Western states, through the Western Interstate Energy Board that Mark has mentioned, we're a member of, put out a request to DOE that all true waste or suspect true waste or what calls waste that might be true waste be shipped as a type B package, which is a sort of a very specific type of packaging. So we had that exact question and that point, and there's an existing policy position from the Western states that true waste always be shipped at type B. And even if it is suspected to be type or true, then it should be created and treated as such. So we're working on that issue.
And then as Julia mentioned, from, her office supports the Transportation Emergency Preparedness Program and the training. We just had a TEP class in Umatilla County last week, 2 weeks ago. There's been a lot going on. So we've got that in complement with what we're already doing and have been doing for years with our partners at Oregon State University. So it's ongoing. It's going to continue. Sage?
As you're traveling around, I think that, and I know this is a bigger question federally with our small modular reactors, trying to power data centers and stuff. Is there conversation going on about this might, obviously everything includes waste. Would that, affect the long-term ability for Hanford to get rid of their waste if we're creating more in the US? And not having you to answer that question now, but it's something that I'd be interested in knowing about.
Reactor waste is considered high-level radioactive waste, and that is different, just like the Trojan site and the disposal of the Trojan site waste, which is classified as high-level waste. And so we talked about the independent spent fuel storage installation, which is the Trojan site. Columbia Generating Station also has an specific. So fuel from nuclear power plants is considered high-level waste. So it's treated differently than what the cleanup sites like Hanford and the other sites are. Similar names on some things like tank waste, high-level waste, and spent fuel, but
To be clear,
yeah,
the facility that was going to take all that, the mountain, which is no longer going to take all of it, would have taken both commercial spent nuclear fuel and defense high-level waste. So eventually there will be a need to be a facility for both of those things. Whether or not they're the same facility is still up in the air, because nobody
and
knows.
the fuel question on modular reactors, there's lots of discussion on that, but I don't think anybody's answered it because we haven't built one yet.
Yeah, and I think that's just a broader question, like for me as a board member, is to kind of, we're not just shipping this waste in the state of Oregon, like there are facilities for this and there's capacity for that. It's the broader question of, there may be capacity for that in the future. Sorry, I saw you shaking your head, but
Yeah, I mean, there's
I think
waste,
that's,
but
I think that's a broader question of as we go forward, you know, realizing.
When we get to board business, I mean, that is a major function of this board is to look at the siting of high-level waste repository and where that stuff goes. So that would be a good thing to talk about.
I digress, thank you.
But before I'm done with that, unless there's any questions, but I wanted to refer to Sarah, Matt, and Tom, if you guys have any other updates on anything.
I went, but I have another one, but if you want to go first.
After you, I'll go after you.
Okay, budget cycle is happening. The comment period for fiscal 2028 cleanup priorities, which is another way of saying budget priorities without saying budget because that's embargoed, closes this Friday. So we're working on your comments from the Odo. No surprise, we're asking for money to clean up the site. And to make sure things are transported safely. Sorry, it's been a long day. Transported safely, people are communicated, risk, and all of the above. And look for that in the coming days. We'll send it around to the board.
Tom mentioned that was 2028 because we're looking ahead, but of course, you mentioned earlier this meeting that FY20 federal fiscal year 2027 budgets are still in process, and that's the immediate concern as well.
Waiting on the Senate.
What's the biggest, that's gonna be on this letter asking for the budget from holding?
Tom, you have the draft, and we typically reference the what's referred to as the compliant budget. You know, the ecology puts out an assessment of what is considered a compliant budget based on DOE's own analysis. And that's usually what we reference in our comment letters. I believe Esteban, that's over 6 billion.
Matt,
Well, on the Hanford related front, I have been watching the RFP process for the 200 West related to the M6265 milestone, which is that critical path when DOE decides what they're going to do with the 200 West roads. I did take a look at the most recent Amendment 6, and of course that brings up we've talked about fun with nomenclature, how we like to reclassify things. This particular amendment decided to introduce the term mixed low-level waste similar to pre-treated waste. So I'm still working through that, trying to figure out what that means and why they moved the date up for that instead of, I want to say January 1st of 28. They decided to move the start of that project up to 2027, Jan 1st, which really surprised me because I am unsure of any of the warm or WAP projects that are going to be ready to create a liquid waste by then. But that's something that we still have to review, why these changes were made. That's on the Hanford related front. As to the NRC or some tangential things, I have been working on some of the NRC wholesale revisions, including the DOE and Department of War cross compatibilities with NRC rules. Right now, I'm working on the microreactor licensing requirements. And one of the most important ones, at least I think for the board, that the board might be interested in, supposed to come out tomorrow, is the implementation of the National Environmental Policy Act under Part 51 of the NRC. You will see if it comes out tomorrow. If it does, it's one of the major ones I expect to be a lot of changes within that part. You would not need to do an environmental action evaluation to. That's some of the exclusions. That was part of the DOE stuff that they did earlier. NRC is moving more towards a generic EIS. It stands alongside some of the site-specific materials that will also be required. We will see how they implement many of the changes that have happened to meet our NEPA policy. National Environmental Protection Act.
the DOE request for applications referred to a section 12 NEPA, and there is no section 12 in the document. So the, Hanford and all of the issues that we've talked about here are regulated by at least
And
8, 10, 12 different agencies, different authorities. So when you start to just talk about waste transportation, it feels like you've dropped down the rabbit hole into Wonderland because the it's kind of complex, to say the least. So one of, I think, the positive things that this administration, the current administration, is at least talking about is trying to consolidate and rationalize some of the regulation, which would be a good thing if it's done based on science and risk, and we will see what happens. Any thoughts on that from EPA? Anything coming in from your direction, Jack?
No, I don't think, no. It's,
NRC, basically.
yeah,
Okay. Anything else?
Sarah?
Odo? Yes, sir.
The Hanford Natural Resource Trustee Council continues to work hard, but there really aren't any updates now.
Any timeline when you guys will assess damages?
We are pretty much done with the assessment for groundwater, injury to groundwater. DOE disagrees with some of it, and so we're working through those disagreements. We are having a workshop this month on some of the riparian injuries to riparian caused by groundwaters, contaminated groundwater seeping into the river, and so we suspect there are injuries to prevent those. Not as soon as that groundwater enters the water column, it gets diluted very quickly, but we believe there are injuries to the fire enters. Which is like the gravel and where the groundwater upwells into the river to gravel. And for terrestrial injury determination, we're very much working through that. So when will that be done, that injury assessment? Probably in the next 2 to 3 years. We have a tolling agreement that ends in 2031. And we would like to be done before that tolling agreement ends, and that is, I don't really want to get into it, what that tolling agreement, with settlement agreement, that tolling agreement is worth, because that's a lot of conversation, but we hope to have the injury identified and restoration plans in place by 2030. It's an optimistic.
Max, anything else?
I think we're good.
Okay, segueing into board business, Mark, if you could just again confirm the dates for the August meeting.
August 10th is a travel day, so we will. That morning, staff will leave Salem, heading north to pick up anybody along the way. For an afternoon meeting at Ecology, Richland, say about 1:30-ish, about 4 hours, then we'll make stops for anybody that wants to get picked up along the way, and that'll be August 10th. The tour will be the 11th. So logistically, we have hotel booked right now tentatively for every member of the board. Need to confirm who can actually come that week. We have the hotel lined out. We'll do a group dinner on site with other colleagues that are going to be there on the night of the 10th. Tuesday is the tour. So we will work out the logistics with Hanford staff. Their bus is probably coming to the hotel, pick people up. We may take a couple of our vans, depending on the number of people we've got following behind, working out where we're gonna go on site. Specifically, can't see the whole site, but we're gonna see things that are important, including Central Waste Complex. So when that ends, then Auto staff will be coming back to Salem. Max and I will be continuing to stay for the rest of the roadshow. And then I think Tom's gonna be that week for have related activities, Tom and Jen probably. So busy week, but that's the week of August 10th.
Okay, and anyone, if you're over there anyway, you could make an appointment to see reactor, the B reactor, which is definitely worth.
It's under construction.
Yeah, it's closed right now.
You can see the historic, Hanford town sites, the bank and the high school, but not that B reactor.
Yeah, pretty cool too. Another time.
Put it in roof line.
And bathrooms.
And I think the information center's still open.
Yeah, the museum on offsite is still open as well.
Should be.
Okay, next thing on the board business list was the concept of forming a transportation committee or subcommittee or work group. That's something that was done in the past, like 10, well, even 20+ years ago, and helped actually form the framework for a lot of the operating procedures that are in place now for shipments of radioactive waste out of Hanford and other locations. So the group, our forefathers, so to speak, helped put that stuff together. So the question now is there any way or any reason for this board to contribute to some sort of a similar effort today? So Mark, your thoughts?
So as Jeff mentioned, they had a transportation committee, a subcommittee from this board that operated for a few years at least, regular meetings, was involved in some of the outreach along the shipping corridor when the true campaign, the first one, was actively moving shipments a couple times a week. So different public meetings, they had members of the board that assisted with that. I don't recall from anything that I can see that they wrote any policy papers or recommendations or suggestions related to that. Staff have been talking about what this would look like, whether it should be a work group or a subcommittee. But I guess my question to the board at this point is, would it be of any value is getting an updated staff report about what's occurring with planning for the resumption of the true shipments, the silk campaign, other potential campaigns? Was that sufficient? Is there an interest for the board to do anything more than that?
There's a potential value add that's sort of in the gray space here. If there was a group of the board who was interested in becoming the experts, the non-ODO experts on transportation, that would be available to go to public meetings and say, we're HCB, we're here, we know these things, and, give book reports on it.
But at the same time, that would be redundant with your role. So
Potentially,
yeah, potentially.
It could be a force multiplier with everything that's going to be happening.
we can't go to every town meeting along with
This is
So my,
for 10 years or more that these campaigns are going to be going. So
my question really would be for our elected representatives, and you can pass this on to Bobby Levy too. It's like, what can we do for you? On the ground, contribute in any way, shape or form. I mean, that's fundamentally ODO's job. Can we add value? And you don't have to answer that now, but as we go through the summer and through, next year, that's, I think, an open question is, do you see any role for the people on this board in that, mostly communication to the public, the public meetings and down through the transportation program. Any other comments, questions? Jim, you live kind of adjacent, would.
No, I think it'd be a great idea to set up a committee, frankly, and we're also looking at rail potentially, yes.
Yeah.
And, round up the folks in Central Oregon, Bend, Redmond, and them up to speed.
We missed something in this audit report. The movement. Want to do that one?
Okay, let's finish with this topic. and then we'll come back to that.
I mean, is that your ask is whether we should set
Yeah,
up a,
it's an open question. I don't think you need to answer it today, but we wanted to get it out there and,
yeah,
yeah. I think rail, in addition to road kind of,
yeah.
and yeah, the routing and
And with the resurgency, true, I mean, it's already happened once, I mean, the emergency managers across the way are all gonna have to be brought up to speed.
right.
I would say like the training that we're doing is bringing us up to speed on what's going on. But just continuing that training because there is a crux of that. If you jump, not to say that the public should be informed, but if we're not all the way there and then questions start to come to our departments about maybe, you know what I mean?
That's already happened.
Yes, and so that's why it's so important to make sure that we're getting that training and bolster that before we start those, because those questions come so quickly that it's, some people might
Can
not.
you give us an example?
I can.
Yeah,
I can, my phone's rang more than once, and it was from colleagues along the corridor. Because, public officials, an emergency management colleague called me because their commissioners heard about this liquid Hanford tank waste that was going down 84. And there was an immediate concern, so those kinds of things come up, and it was because of something that went out through the news. So to try and answer the questions and educate that person, which was one of the reasons why we went to, Ontario and to Baker City, was to help train and communicate to that community about what it is, so they can also answer the questions for their elected officials. But we get those calls, I mean, all of us, I think, have fielded those calls. What is this I hear? And also we get it from our legislative colleagues too, saying, hey, we heard about this going on in our area. It's like, what, you guys are the subject matter experts. What is this? Or what isn't it? So it's a lot. But again, when you start thinking about, to Jim's point, where can we plug ourselves in? I don't know what that looks like yet, but that would take somebody taking the lead on the board to say, okay, this is the scope of work that we're gonna do. And then we help provide that. I like that training piece where if you form a group and it's say Jim and 3 or 4 others, we help provide the training. And then say, where do you guys want to go out and start engaging the public, which would be those force multipliers for us.
And I think that was a question like once. If I know Ryan does a good job, but like, I think that was kind of a question I had to ask when you said about the whole thing.
Well, you're talking about the fire and the closure.
No, well, like
Yeah.
the training, because I think a lot of those, questions come up. So when people ask them, I was like, "Shoot, I don't know. So who's gonna answer? I was like, I just go to
Yeah,
you.
in emergency management, we talk about perception being reality, and people can get this misconception like that fast. The next thing you know, we're chasing that to stop it. So
Remember the tunnel collapse, right?
tunnel collapse in May in 2017, as I remember well, and actually used it in one of my talks because the national media went up with this nuclear disaster in Washington State. And the tunnel collapse and the incident was isolated to the site, and it did meet the threshold for site or emergency, which meant Washington, Oregon had to stand up. I'm sure Dave was working on the site during that. But the perception was that went to the national media was nuclear disaster. That was what we were dealing with. We were dealing with that crisis, not what was actually going on. And we worked on that for 2 weeks with our colleagues in Washington over that. So, but that's a good point.
We didn't stand up.
What's that?
We didn't stand up.
Well, we activated the AOC.
It
So,
was basically.
okay, let's,
So-
we'll,
Yeah, just one clarifying point on that. I think that's the perception is realities. And that if we get too far ahead of the game and we don't have public safety representatives looking at that stuff before we're going out to the public, there can be a lot of misconceptions of what they're understanding versus what the public's understanding. So I just caution on jumping into that before we get that full grasp of the group.
well, and that's that in parallel that you and I are involved in with all of our colleagues along the corridor.
Yep.
In other areas, so.
Public information officers would be reviewing all the information that's being trained to the people who are being trained. as well.
Ours is for PIOs.
Okay, we're going to table the transportation work group discussion and pick it up again in August. Odo has another issue that you wanted to bring up right now. What is it?
Should we just dive in right now? Yeah, it's brief, but, should have mentioned this in the little update. There is a ongoing rulemaking right now. How do I couch this? It's not Hanford specific, I should tell everybody. So the way that we partially fund some of these trainings. There is a fee that's put on, haulers of certain radioactive material through the state. The way this works in practice is, the US Department of Transportation has requirements for when a truck has to carry a placard related to radioactive material. If it requires a placard from the US Department of Transportation, you're also required to get a ODOT permit through the state when you move that material, and getting that permit has a fee. The amount of that fee is set in rule. Well, it's a long story here. That rule was set in 1983 and hasn't been touched since. The rule is sort of our rule, Oregon Department of Energy. The governing body for that rule is called the Energy Facility Siting Council, or FSEC, which everybody knows in this world as the permitting body for major energy projects in the state. May not know that they also handle the rules related to the fees put on placarded shipments of radioactive material through Oregon. So we've been doing a rulemaking project for FSEC, or FSEC's doing the project where there's staff in this case, to look at whether the fee should be updated. It should be. And by how much, and if it should be brought in from only trucks, which it is right now, to also including trains, to the point earlier that Jim made. So we as staff have, and there was a rulemaking advisory committee, or RAC, that was associated with this project. We've worked over the last 9 months, or so here. At the FSEC meeting in May, was it? The middle of May? We made a recommendation to the council that they open up the formal process, the rulemaking process, issue draft rules, and then open a comment period from the public on those rules. The recommendation from staff is that the fee, there's a couple different categories, but the primary one is $70 per placard per shipment. That's the fee that hasn't been changed since 1983. We recommend that go to $125, which is a tremendous discount compared to inflation, as we might look at it. That fee was probably high in 1983, and now it's pretty low. Anyway, we think $125 would be able to fund our program for safety training in the future. We also recommend that be including trains, of which we have information and are able to do that. Some states do require, it's not a part of the fee on the trains. And then we recommend that the council every couple of years, every 4 years, I think, do an analysis for inflation, so they don't get 40 years behind on their fee updates. The reason I say this is not necessarily related to Hanford is because we use that money for the whole state. That money goes to, most of that money goes to Oregon State University, Oregon Health Authority, and then some of the time from Mark in order to hold these trainings across the state for safety training of hazmat crews and other first responders on radioactive material safety. So that's how we fund that program primarily. We also have money for from US Department of Energy and the Western Interstate Energy Board for other types of trainings, particularly on the true waste safety. So just people are understanding how this all works together. A couple sources of money, we pull it together and do these trainings across the whole state. That's probably what I wanted to say. The public comment period is supposed to open up tomorrow, I think is when the official notice is going to go, unless it's gone out today. And then there'll be a public hearing in front of the Energy Facility Siting Council in July, at their July meeting. And then if FSEC makes a final choice on this, the rules would go into effect later this year. And the legislature has to validate a fee that goes into effect when an agency changes a fee. There has to be a legislative validation of that as well. So it's a bit of a process, but at the end of this all, we're optimistic we'll have the money to do the trainings and that and I'll tell you this, the trucking companies were on our rack and they were supportive, you can believe it, supportive of increasing the fee as long as trains were also brought into the flow of that process.
Yeah.
Fairness of all, modes of transportation, I guess, that makes sense to me too. So that's our recommendation. I think that was the point on.
Okay, back to board business. I'm gonna jump around a little bit here. Jim, if you could go next and provide an update on the Hanford Advisory Board, what's going on there?
Yeah, sure. I talked to my counterpart here. I'm gonna sub that out to him. I was a little busy during the last HAB meeting and committee meetings, and Tom said he'd pick it up, but I just want to get on my soapbox briefly. I brought up Alara earlier because it resets the figures on what the public can take on relative to risk. And I think that's important because we're seeing the SMR thing come to life, right? In the last legislative session in Oregon, it reared its ugly head. And I fear it's going to come up again in the long session. And I think we need to bear in mind that it's also being brought by a legislator that's selling property to big data and making lots of money doing so and taking campaign contributions. And the suggestion is we need to take another look at it in Eastern Oregon or certainly at Hanford. And I bring that up because I know we've got legislators in the room and online, and of course we're all concerned about this, but I will get this to you, Max, or Jeff or Mark. But coming up on the 12th is a webinar. Does the nuclear renaissance sound too good to be true? That's because it is. Join us on Friday, June 12th at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for the webinar collision course of Hanford Cleanup Nuclear Energy and Data Centers. This webinar will explore the myth of nuclear reprocessing and why adding new nuclear to the Hanford nuclear site is a bad idea, and how the parasitic nature of nuclear energy and data centers are creating a new wave of environmental justice burdens falling squarely on the shoulders of Indigenous frontline communities. So I will get that to you, and you can maybe get it out to the folks and maybe have an opportunity to look at that and take a little more holistic approach. I mean, Oregon voted to suspend any nuclear projects, until there's a national repository, which, as Tom said, there currently is not. And you hear folks say, well, SMRs are safer. I mean, they're not Chernobyl, but they don't say they are safe either. So I think we need to take a pretty healthy look at it. So with that, Tom, can you give my HAB update?
Sure. The HAB exists at the current time. Hanford Advisory Board. It's a site-specific advisory board for the environmental management Hanford site. It consists of interests and individuals. So the Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board has a seat. Oregon Department of Energy has a seat. And then there are also members of the public as public at large members. The packet gets approved. The membership packet gets approved every 2 years. And usually they split it up so half the board's in the packet at a time. Last year's packet got stuck somewhere and did not get approved in time. So the decision was made to put all of the membership of the HAB in one packet, which is all in with headquarters, DOE headquarters. It has to go through the White House and a whole bunch of steps. There's 26 or 27 steps for approval. We're waiting to see whether our terms are approved as of October 1st. Right now, we still have a board and we're still doing work where we've issued 3 or 4 pieces of advice this year, advising the tri-party agencies, which is DOE, Ecology, and EPA, about how we do public meetings and how to do communication along the transportation corridor and things like that. We have technical committees. I'm the chair of the Cleanup and Risk Mitigation Committee, which is sort of the EPA surplus side of the House. Then there's a tank waste committee that Matt would be on if his membership packet wasn't in the limbo. He sits in as a member of the public. And then we have communications outreach, where Jim is the vice chair. And then Mia, who's on this board, is the vice chair of the entire HAB. So good representation there. Next meeting, as Matt said, or Mark said, is, sort of backed up on the OHCB, so we're spending a lot of time in the Tri-Cities there. And, come October 1st, hopefully there will be another report for the half.
Well done.
Thank you. Any questions about the Hanford Advisory Board?
Yeah, I'm surprised that we're politicizing policies that are being considered here and bashing legislators that aren't sitting here, so. I didn't know that this was a forum to do that with, so. There you go.
Oh, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Matt, I sent you the priorities. Could you bring that, one step ahead of me? Okay, so this is a segue into discussion about Rev 9 and whether or not this board wants to comment on, and to what degree it wants to comment on Rev 9. And took a look at the authorizing legislation for the board, and then a few items on here had to do with principal interests that we've been involved in the past couple of years. And I'm not really looking for approval per se of this. I just wanted to have a discussion vis-a-vis, if you scroll up a little bit. So some of these are taken directly out of the authorizing legislation, and it's referenced over on the right side. So it's serve as Oregon's policy focal point for Hanford related matters. So very general stuff, but if you go down a little bit, advise the governor and the legislature. But as you get a little bit further down, there are things that are germane in terms of commenting on Rev 9. For example, protect the gotta get my steps up. Protect the Columbia River. Oppose the transportation of both liquid radioactive waste across the Oregon corridors. Defend Oregon's statutory prohibitions and formal policy positions. Insist on transparent science-based site and corridor-specific analysis. Require a credible long-term disposal pathway for high-level waste, so on and so forth. So if I think we have general agreement on these priorities, the real question is there anything as we put together a list like this that should be on here that's not, or is there anything on here that should get dropped off the list? And then we can use this in a very general way to kind of guide priorities for Rev 9. So the main example that I would give would be worker safety at Hanford. That's not on this priority list because that's in Washington. The vast majority of workers live and work in Washington. So is that really a priority for Oregon? Should we be concerned about radiation exposure of workers at Hanford, for example? That's an example of something that's not on this list because is it or is it not an Oregon priority? So that's what I'm kind of looking for is some examples. It would be helpful to have a priority list. That way we can decide which of the 52 different baseball cards we would want to comment on. So open discussion, so please.
There's a lot to unpack in this list, and I think we were talking about work groups and subcommittees earlier. It seems like this would be a perfect topic for a work group or a subcommittee, because there are different interpretations of those ORSs as that, I don't think that the ORS specifically says to serve as policy focal point for Hanford Tomato Matters. I don't think that's in there. That's Odo's role. So we gotta disambiguate some stuff. there's a lot on this list that Rev 9 doesn't touch.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
this is sort of, maybe there's an OHCV values white paper that comes out first, and then you can look at Rev 9 through that lens. It's a 120-day comment period, so it's plenty of time to do that. So that might be a path forward to start with a work group or a subcommittee to dig into the statutes and figure out where the lanes are.
Yes, and it's not all statutory. For
Right.
example, the liquid waste shipments across Oregon
Right.
is, that's not outlined in the statute. So it's what the board feels like we should be working on in that context. Yeah,
So it's Rev 9 plus. So maybe
Yes.
that values sort of white paper might be a good.
yeah. Like building 324 is not on here.
Right.
But should it be? It's, yeah.
And I would agree, Chair, with the interpretation of looking at the statutes and not everything is in the statute. Because when I first look at number 11, ensure robust emergency preparedness on site, that I feel like would include worker safety because it's robust emergency preparedness. So there might be something to look at.
Workers in Oregon.
Yeah,
Right.
what those statutes that they're referencing as a primary danger, what those are referring to. And there's definitely interpretation of that, but I think trying to, like me looking at that right now, I have no idea what those three statutes actually pertain to.
Please.
I think if my organization were going to develop comments, the two things we would focus on is locations within this permit area where material is going to get moved off the site and shipped on Oregon roads. And then the second would be locations within the permit area that are currently and actively leaking waste into the Columbia River, and probably just focus on those top two tiers of like immediate effects to the health of Oregonians. So I'll just throw that out there as where my interest would lie.
Yes. Of the truck over. Liquid radioactive waste.
But that's not in Rev 9.
And so, and then the second clarifying question, if I can share. When it says priority 1, 2 through 12, are those ranked or not? Okay.
They're not, sorry.
No,
That should have been column A, B, C or bullets. Yeah, bullets, yeah. But again, discussion, I wanted to get this out there and, maybe work this over the next meeting or so, because it would help guide us in terms of what do we really want to comment on Rev 9, because again, 20,000 pages, we're not gonna do that. We're gonna hit it at a fairly high level. Protect the Columbia River, okay, that means that we will comment on groundwater, for example. Yeah, what's that in the issue? Okay, any further discussion? I will follow up on this by polling members outside this meeting to see who would be interested in working this issue, developing this draft a little bit further. In the room first. Sure. Okay. Do we have any volunteers in the room? Okay. Do
But I'm not competing with Tom for page count.
And I'll provide staff support.
Okay, so for the record, say your name out loud.
Allison Cole.
Mike Freeman.
Sage along.
Then you've got staff too.
Yeah.
Do we want to,
You want to take a motion?
so what we need to decide now is whether it's a subcommittee or a work group, and then we can work on what scope looks like.
Okay, remind us what the difference is.
Subcommittees, to my understanding, can make decisions without bringing to the full board. So work group would be a book report group that says, this is what we found in all of our stuff. Bring it back to the full board for a question, for a vote, or a motion.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a working group.
Have a discussion real quick, Chair, about
the benefits of both and which way you want to go with who's here and who's online.
Yes, so online, we'd like to hear some comments from board members. Okay, discussion in the work group or subcommittee?
I would think that a work group would be beneficial because there's a lot of members on here maybe that will have advice and input that is valuable, and I wouldn't want to make a decision without having their input. That would be my answer.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion? And I would ask for unanimous consent.
Motion.
Go ahead, you have to make the motion
I'll make the motion to form a work group
to,
to, develop public comment for,
no, develop the
develop
Yeah,
this.
priorities.
List of priorities. Oh, okay.
Okay,
Sorry, I misunderstood what you're talking about.
is there a
Okay.
second?
Second.
Okay, I would ask for unanimous consent if there are no objections. Okay, hearing no objections, the motion is passed.
Real quick, Jeff, before we move on,
Sure.
side note, Max, last year we talked about a group of us were interested in going to Bremerton.
Yes.
And I don't know, I mean, we're all busy, but, I think we probably still would be, it seems like that was a fall thing.
It is in September.
Hmm?
September or October, as I recall, is when they do the shipment. What Jim has mentioned here, numbers that may not know. The Bremerton Shipyard, Breeden Sound is where Navy Western Pacific Fleet ships go for maintenance, including decommissioning of submarines when they have reached the end of their life. The compartment, the reactor compartment, kind of the middle portion of the sub, is dismantled and then shipped on a barge up the Columbia, out of Puget Sound, down the coast, Washington, up the river, to final disposal location at Hanford. When it traverses through Oregon waters, we're on call for safety response, although the Navy has its own, and Coast Guard have their own escorts there. And a couple of years ago, some of us had the chance to go observe and monitor and inspect the Navy's work in Bremerton. And it's a pretty cool experience. You get to go under a ship in dry dock, under a submarine in dry dock. As part of it. I'll let you know, Jim, when they call me. They usually call me on the summertime as they get closer to the occurrence there.
It's, still, it's part of the transportation, right? I mean.
Yeah, the reason we go is because of the connection on the river and then for final disposal of the Hanford site. So, Oregon Health Authority is also our counterparts in this regard, Radiation Protection Services, and then our group as well, for representing the states and safe transportation of radioactive materials in Oregon waters in that case.
Or Washington Department of Health goes to do inspection of the package before it goes. Oregon gets invited to observe. It's a twice a year thing. So then it goes up to Port Benton and then it gets offloaded. Then it goes to the reactor trench.
So Stephen Bedrick and I went up, year and a half ago.
2024?
Yeah, 2024. And participated in the inspection of the barge with the submarine compartment. Put onto the barge, and they ran through all the different scenarios, all the bad things that could happen coming down the coast and up the Columbia River. And it's fascinating. For example, if the barge sinks, does it float or does it sink to the bottom? And if, all of those kind of questions were in play. It was very, very interesting. And then they also cover what happens when it gets to Hanford. How do they get it off the boat, across the site and into trench 90,
The little 32 axle trailer that gets picked up at Port Benton and then it slow creeps and rolls and it's right.
Speaking of those, it is really cool.
Yeah, when those that are interested, once Max gets a heads up, then we'll coordinate because travel will be authorized on that. And the overnight stay. So we'll have to do the logistics on that to get you up there, plus the paperwork, and everybody has to be cleared to go on site, so.
Very hit, can't put it on a truck.
No, it goes on the barge up to Columbia.
Yeah, well, once you get more on the port there. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, reversing the barge, special, the barge itself it's just single use, but there's.
Did you get a copy of the transportation report when we were on board and everything? It's got a picture of it going up the river. And a lot of people, because they do it twice a year, they're oblivious to this, oh, there's something else that's going up the river. That's what it is.
If you have a submarine, or you may not, or Navy, you may not realize how large they are. They are really big. Which sounds kind of naive to say that, but it's impressive. Yeah. And then once they get to Port Bend, there's all this massive.
You're welcome to go if you want to go. So just, it'll be fall, so we'll give everybody a heads up.
Speaking of tours, what happened with WHIP?
Oh, it's postponed.
More,
It's-
more information,
It's,
please.
it's postponed. We've advocated for Oregon officials to go down to WIP. The fall trip that Tom was gonna lead from staff has been postponed, so we will try and get, a trip back on in 2027.
So the WHIP tour involves getting on an elevator and going 2,000 feet below the ground into a salt mine where they dispose of radioactive waste.
After
Definitely.
plane rides and van trips,
It is.
across the desert too.
If that interests you, you're in the right place.
And it's a shame
Really
because
puts, it really puts it in perspective. It's one thing to read it, it's another to ride that elevator down.
Yeah, it's a good.
when it works. I tried to go once and the elevator was not working, so you can get to go during the whole just on top.
Better than put you on the elevator and then halfway down.
That's true.
Stop.
And going in the fall is nice because the tarantulas are migrating,
Oh, that's good news.
so.
Part of the resumption of the true shipping campaign advocated as part of Oregon's ramp up is to get Oregon officials down there for a tour, so. More to follow on that, but we have a list, we know who's interested, and we'll try and get another one of those going next year.
Okay, we've got 2 more minutes for open discussion before we open the meeting for public comment, so. Anyone online, any board members online have anything to contribute? Be open to.
Nope. I'll fill this 2 minutes with, we have, so June 1st, I mentioned this, during the previous, presentations. July 1st is a really big milestone. We will share information after that date with this board. On that date is when DOE, and Eddie mentioned this, and I didn't get it took off. DOE has to make a choice on, where and how they will treat and dispose of the tank waste from the west side of the Hanford tanks. Called the Warren Project West Area Remediation.
Risk remediation.
Risk management, something like that. Yeah. West side tanks, and this is the big decision point as to whether that tank waste will be grouted at Hanford or at least in Washington State prior to shipments, or whether DOE would propose to ship liquid radioactive waste from Hanford to Utah and Texas disposal locations, and then solidify it at those particular facilities. State of Oregon, this board, our agency, the governor herself, just to reiterate, strongly opposes the shipment of liquid radioactive tank waste to our state, and so that July 1st date is a really big issue for everybody. We'll let you know what happens.
Okay, the board meeting is now open for public
So
comment.
there's the reactor department.
This is Max and I in front of a reactor department.
Looks like Dan Solitz was hand up.
Dan Solitz, please.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to respond to the legislator's comment about the board having something to say about a piece of legislation regarding new nuclear reactors in Oregon. That is a constitutional amendment that was, and I helped do that, was passed by initiative referendum. If the legislature wants to comment on that, they should either go down the way it came up and have somebody do another initiative petition, or do a referendum from the legislature back to the people. It goes down the way it came up, it goes up the way it came down. And so I think anybody's got a right to tell the legislature that that process needs to be followed in honor of the folks who gathered the signatures and passed the legislation, although I must say with the help of Mount St. Helens. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And there's Dan Saris, please.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. First of all, thank you all for delving into so many difficult issues today. I just, as a participant from very afar, watching online, I appreciate your work. Everyone there is just like to hash it out for hours and hours. I really appreciate you thinking through the ramifications of what's coming from Hanford. I guess my main question was really about the K area. Way back in the first presentation, when they dropped that stack and everything like hit the ground, I'm just curious, like, is there an effort to do more monitoring when there's like a major disturbance like that, like an impact to the ground? As this kind of like you could imagine it as like a major storm or something hitting, like a meteorite hitting the ground or something. It's going to impact the way the water moves in the subsurface with so much weight falling. So for the K reactor area, I was just curious about like the status of the monitoring and whether it's been intensified or whether there are studies planned for like understanding how all that disturbance so close to the river is going to impact the flow of the water, the movement of contaminants. EPAs and ecology and energy are all obviously working super hard on the hexavalent chromium issue, which we appreciate enormously. It's a big step to recognize that hexavalent chromium is as bad as we know it is. So thank you for that work. But I just, watching that large piece of structure fall and hit the ground, it made me wonder, like, are we capturing the impact of what's there and studying it as best we can? So in our comments going forward this week, we're definitely going to be calling for a robust budget to fulfill those responsibilities, to study and to understand what is happening. And I just to end it, thank you for being there today. It's really, truly appreciate it. Washington just went through the worst industrial accident ever. And you're all sitting there thinking about really difficult topics, and I really appreciate you. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dan, for your comment.
I can take a shot at answering that a little, yeah. Okay,
It's just a long comment.
okay, okay.
Anyone else online?
And so what's your hand still up or?
No, that's serious.
Oh, that's serious. Right.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no further comments. This meeting is adjourned. Okay, the recording is stopped, and I would just say that there's an informal